I used to wake up before my alarm because my body knew the rhythm. 5:30 every weekday, same as it had been for 15 years. Even after the accident, my eyes still opened at 5:30, like my muscles hadn't gotten the memo that my life had changed. That morning, the house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the faint ticking of the clock above the stove. The sun hadn't come up yet, but I could see its glow starting to push against the blinds. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to my wife breathe beside me. Emily always slept on her side, back turned toward me. She hadn't faced me in weeks. I tried to sit up. Pain exploded through my lower back, sharp and electric, like someone had driven a hot nail straight into my spine. I sucked in a breath and froze, sweat breaking out across my forehead. My hands gripped the sheets while I waited for it to pass. From the other side of the bed, Emily groaned. "Jesus, Mike," she muttered. "Can you not do that?" "Do what?" I whispered, my voice tight. "Make noise. It's 5 in the morning." I almost laughed at that. 5 in the morning used to be my time. Boots on, coffee down, lunch packed. I used to leave the house before she even stirred. Now I was the one apologizing for existing too loudly. "Sorry," I said. She rolled over, facing the wall again. Conversation over. I lay back down slowly, staring at the ceiling once more. My back throbbed, but worse than the pain was the familiar weight in my chest, that heavy, useless feeling, the kind that settles in when you realize you're no longer the man you used to be, and the people around you have started to notice. 3 months earlier, I'd been working a commercial job on the south side of Des Moines. Steel frame, 6 stories up. I'd done that kind of work my whole adult life. Construction wasn't just a job for me, it was who I was. I liked building things, liked seeing something real at the end of the day. The fall happened fast. One bad weld, one step where there shouldn't have been empty air. I didn't even remember hitting the ground, just waking up in the hospital with tubes in my arms and a doctor telling me I was lucky to be alive. 2 fractured vertebrae, nerve damage. "We'll see how you heal," he'd said, in that careful voice doctors use when they don't want to promise anything. Healing turned out to be slower than anyone expected. I wasn't paralyzed, thank God, but I couldn't work, couldn't lift, couldn't stand for more than 15 minutes without pain shooting down my legs. Physical therapy helped, but not enough, not yet. Emily tried it first, I'll give her that. The first couple of weeks, she brought me ice packs and made soup and told me everything would be okay. She went with me to appointments, held my hand in the waiting room. Then the bills started coming in. Short-term disability covered part of my paycheck, but not all of it. The mortgage didn't care that I was hurt. The truck payment didn't either. Emily worked as a dental office manager, decent job, but she'd never been the primary breadwinner. We'd built our life around my income. Stress has a way of changing people. It started with size, with looks, with the way she'd check the mailbox and frown before bringing the envelopes inside. Then came the comments. "Must be nice to sleep in," she said one morning while getting ready for work. "I'm up before you," I replied, confused. "Yeah, but you don't have anywhere to be." That one stuck. By the time the alarm actually went off, Emily was already out of bed, stomping around the room. I heard drawers slam, hangers scrape. "I'll make breakfast," I offered. She paused in the doorway, already dressed, makeup half done. She looked at me like she was deciding whether it was worth responding. "Don't bother," she said. "I'll grab something on the way." The door closed harder than necessary. I waited until I heard her car pull out of the driveway before trying to get up again. It took me a full 5 minutes to swing my legs over the side of the bed, another 2 just to stand. The pain was always worse in the mornings, like my body punished me for daring to rest. I shuffled to the kitchen and poured myself coffee, black, the way I'd always taken it. My hands shook slightly as I lifted the mug. I noticed that now. Every small weakness, every reminder that I wasn't as steady as I used to be. On the counter sat a stack of unopened mail, bills, medical statements. I didn't need to open them to know what they said. I carried my coffee to the living room and eased myself onto the couch, careful not to move too fast. The TV was still on from the night before, muted. A morning news anchor smiled at me silently, talking about traffic and weather like the world hadn't shifted off its axis. I stared at the wall instead. I hated the couch, hated that it had become my place, hated that Emily came home every night and found me there, like I was planted and forgotten. Around noon, my phone buzzed. A text from my buddy Carl, who'd worked with me for years. "How you holding up, man?" I typed back slowly. "Still busted. PT again tomorrow." There was a pause, then another buzz. "The company's filling your spot. Foreman job went to Trent." I closed my eyes. "I figured," I wrote. "Doesn't mean you're done. You'll be back." I wanted to believe that, I really did, but something in me knew things weren't that simple anymore. Bodies don't always bounce back. Employers don't wait forever. That evening, Emily came home later than usual. I heard her heels before I saw her, clicking sharp against the hardwood floor. "Hey," I said. She dropped her purse on the table, a little too hard. "Hey." "How was work?" She shrugged out of her jacket. "Busy." I waited. She didn't elaborate. "I made pasta. It's still warm." She glanced at the stove, then at me. "You used the expensive sauce?" "It was on sale." She pressed her lips together. I could tell she wanted to say something else, something meaner. We ate in silence, forks scraping against plates. The sound felt too loud. Halfway through, Emily put her fork down. "We need to talk," she said. My stomach tightened. "Okay." "I can't keep doing this," she continued, gesturing vaguely around the room. "Coming home exhausted and still having to worry about everything." "I'm trying," I said. "You know I am." "Trying what?" Her voice rose. "Sitting here, watching TV, going to therapy twice a week?" "I can't work yet," I said, heat creeping into my chest. The doctor doesn't pay our bills, Mike." I stared at her, not recognizing the woman across the table. This was the same person who used to brag about me to her friends, the same person who cried when I proposed. "I didn't choose this," I said quietly. "No, but I'm the one paying for it." That hurt more than I expected. "I'm still contributing," I said. "Disability, the settlement." She laughed, actually laughed. "That little check," she said, "that barely covers groceries." I opened my mouth to respond, then stopped, because I realized something. She didn't know. The settlement wasn't final yet. The lawsuit against the contractor was still in progress. My lawyer had advised me to keep it quiet until everything was signed. I had agreed, thinking it was temporary. Emily assumed I was broke. "Do you have any idea what it's like," she went on, "to be married to someone who can't provide anymore?" There it was. I felt something shift inside me. Not anger, not yet. Something colder. "I'm still your husband," I said. She shook her head slowly. Right now you're just someone I have to take care of." The words landed heavy and final. I pushed my plate away, appetite gone. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said. "I don't want apologies," she said. "I want my life back." She stood up and walked out of the room, leaving her plate untouched. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling again, listening to the distance between us breathe. My back hurt, my pride hurt worse. What Emily didn't know, what no one knew except my lawyer, was that the settlement was going to be big, life-changing big. Enough to pay off the house, enough to erase every bill she'd been stressing over. I'd planned to surprise her. I'd imagined her face when I told her everything would be okay. Now, lying there in the dark, listening to her turn away from me once again, I wondered if saving her was still something I wanted to do. And that's the first time the thought crossed my mind. What happens if I stop? After the last day at the construction site, my arm still ached from the surgery. The fracture from that stupid scaffolding accident wasn't healing as fast as it should. I sat on the worn leather couch in my tiny apartment in Dallas, Texas, staring at the stack of bills on the coffee table. The insurance check had barely covered the physical therapy sessions, and the rest of my savings had disappeared into covering medical supplies and rent. I hadn't expected my life to collapse this way. I'd been the guy who worked long hours, never complaining, always making sure my wife, Jenna, had what she wanted. And then a single misstep, one accident at work, and suddenly I was the useless one. Jenna walked into the apartment, her heels clicking against the laminate floor. I noticed the faint smirk on her face, the same one I'd seen before she started openly mocking me after the accident. "You know," she said, tossing her designer bag onto the couch, "it's kind of impressive how quickly you've become irrelevant." Irrelevant. That word stung more than the pain in my arm. I wanted to scream at her, to tell her exactly what I thought about someone who spent every night shopping online while I struggled to even lift a cup of water. But instead, I clenched my jaw, staring straight at the floor. "Mike?" she said, her voice sharp now, like she realized I wasn't responding. "I heard you," I replied, my voice calm, but there was steel underneath it that she couldn't see yet. I wasn't the same man she'd married. Something inside me had snapped the day she laughed at my accident like it was a bad joke. She flopped onto the couch beside me, glancing at the bills. "You're just sitting there. We have rent, car payments, utilities, everything. How are we supposed to keep up if you can't work?" I felt the anger rising, but I swallowed it. I had to plan first. Any outburst now would ruin everything I was building in my head. "I'll figure it out," I said, keeping my tone measured. "You'll figure it out?" she laughed, a bitter, hollow laugh. "You? After all this time? You've been useless for weeks now, Mike. Weeks. I can't rely on you for anything." I stared at her. That was it. That moment right there was what lit the fire. Weeks of humiliation, weeks of being treated like a child, weeks of pretending I was okay with being called useless. All of it came together in a cold, sharp clarity. I stood up slowly. "You know what, Jenna?" I said, my voice low but cutting. "You've been calling me useless for weeks, laughing at me, treating me like I'm less than human. Do you know what that feels like?" She rolled her eyes. "Spare me the dramatics. You're pathetic, Mike. Admit it. You can't even work, and you expect me to—" "Stop!" I shouted, louder than I intended, and the words made her flinch. "You want to know what it feels like? It feels like being betrayed by the person you trusted most. It feels like watching the woman you love turn against you the moment life isn't perfect." The room fell silent. She looked at me, suddenly unsure, her smirk gone. That hesitation was exactly what I needed. I walked toward the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and continued, my tone calm again. Calm was more dangerous than yelling. "I spent 15 years providing for you, Jenna. 15 years. And now that I'm hurt, you think I'm nothing. You think I'm less than you. Do you know how many nights I worked double shifts to make sure we had savings? Do you know how many mornings I woke up before sunrise to build our future? And what do I get for it?" She opened her mouth, but I cut her off. "You get to call me useless, laugh at my pain, and act like it's funny I can't lift a hammer or drive a truck right now. That's what I get." Her lips pressed together, but she didn't speak. Good. Silence is a powerful thing when you're plotting revenge. And yes, this wasn't about violence or anything physical. This was about showing her what happens when someone treats loyalty and hard work like a joke. Over the next few weeks, I started my plan. I had to be smart. I couldn't just confront her again and scream. That would only make her defensive. I needed leverage. I needed control. First, I began small. I withheld my help in the house, the laundry I usually did, the cooking I usually manage. It was subtle at first, and she barely noticed. Then I started to document everything. Bills she assumed I was paying, I made sure to note when I didn't. When she went out shopping without me, I kept track of every purchase she bragged about. It wasn't about stealing or sabotaging her. It was about creating a record of how dependent she really was on my work and how much she had underestimated me. At first, it was hard to stay quiet. My pride wanted to explode, to yell, to demand respect. But restraint was key. Revenge isn't about being loud, it's about being smart. One evening, Jenna came home from a work event, some gala she insisted I wasn't needed for, and found me in the living room, not even looking at her. "Mike?" she asked, her voice softer now. "Why are you ignoring me?" "I'm not ignoring you," I said, finally looking at her. "I'm letting you see what it feels like when the person who carries everything stops doing it silently." She frowned. "What are you talking about?" I gestured to the bills stacked neatly on the table. Everything. Rent, utilities, groceries, the kids' extracurriculars. I've handled them for years, and you treat me like I'm disposable. You laugh at me. You mock my pain. So now you see what it feels like to wait for support that isn't coming because the provider has stopped. Her face went pale. She realized finally that I wasn't going to beg or plead. I wasn't going to grovel for recognition. I was reclaiming the respect I deserved, and it terrified her. Days turned into weeks, and my quiet rebellion continued. I didn't cook, I didn't help with the house, I didn't answer her calls immediately. She started panicking. She realized she couldn't manage everything alone, not as easily as she thought. Bills slipped past deadlines, calls from service providers became frequent. Her sense of control began to crumble. Finally, one night, she confronted me. "Mike, this has gone too far. You're being ridiculous. You can't just sit there and let everything fall apart." I looked at her cold, measured, and unmoving. "You said I was useless after I got injured. You said I couldn't provide. You said I wasn't enough. Do you understand now?" Her eyes widened. She started to speak, but I held up a hand. "No, Jenna. Not until you see what it feels like to watch someone stop carrying your world because you treated them like they were disposable. This is what you wanted, to see me fail. Congratulations, you're watching." The next morning, she was frantic. The water bill hadn't been paid, the car payment was late, and the kids' school forms weren't submitted. She called her parents, calling me every name she could think of. I stayed calm. Silence is louder than words. Every time she yelled, every time she cried, every time she begged, I stayed silent. The power shift was happening, but I didn't want to rush it. I needed her to feel the weight of her words, to understand how deep the betrayal had cut me. Every sarcastic remark, every laugh at my injury, every dismissal of my sacrifices, she was going to understand the consequences. Then the tipping point came. I got a call from Jenna's work at her marketing firm in Houston. They were checking why a big campaign hadn't been managed properly. She was losing clients, credibility, and control, and it was all because she had relied on me silently managing everything while treating me like I was nothing. When she walked in that evening, she was pale, exhausted, and trembling. "Mike, I didn't realize." I stood in the kitchen, arms crossed. "You didn't realize what? That I've been supporting this household silently while you mocked me? That I've been injured and you still expected me to be invisible?" She looked down at her hands. I thought I could handle it. I didn't think, you never thought, exactly. You never thought about the consequences of calling me useless, and now you're learning." Her tears started flowing freely. For the first time, she saw me not as a man who could be mocked, but as a force to be reckoned with, a man who would no longer accept disrespect. And in that moment, I knew my revenge wasn't about punishment. It was about respect. It was about showing her, finally, that the man she had dismissed was still standing, still capable, still more powerful than she had ever realized. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I simply let her watch the world unravel for a moment while I remained untouched. The quiet satisfaction of that, knowing she finally understood the weight of her words, was worth more than any confrontation. That night, as I lay in bed, my arms still throbbing, I felt something I hadn't in weeks: power, control, and, strangely, peace. Jenna would never see me the same way again, and she would never underestimate me again. The morning after Jenna's breakdown, the apartment felt different. It wasn't that the bills were magically paid or that the chaos had resolved itself. It was the subtle shift in the air. She no longer carried the same smugness, the casual disregard I had grown accustomed to. Instead, there was hesitation, a quiet wariness, as though she were navigating a minefield she didn't even realize existed. I sat at the kitchen table, coffee in hand, my arms still sore from the surgery, but my mind sharp and focused. This was a chessboard, and I was finally moving the pieces. The weeks of careful observation and silent rebellion had paid off. She had tasted what life felt like when I stopped carrying everything for her, and now I could escalate. Not violently, not destructively, but in a way that would make her fully comprehend the consequences of her arrogance. I started with small adjustments to my schedule, subtle but intentional. I took on more freelance consulting projects, carefully selecting clients who needed urgent solutions. The goal wasn't just money, it was leverage. Each successful deal I closed without her input, without her help, was a reminder that I was capable even when she believed otherwise. Jenna began noticing, of course. The first few times she would drop comments. "You're working a lot lately. Don't overdo it." I would just nod, letting her voice trail off. The unspoken message was clear. I could handle things without her micromanagement, and each time she said it, I felt a small thrill of satisfaction. Every word she had thrown at me over the past weeks, every laugh, every dismissive glance was being slowly repaid, not with cruelty, but with truth. Then came the real test. I waited for a weekend when she had planned a girls' trip to Houston. She expected me to manage everything alone. Dinner, laundry, kids, the dog, errands, bills, all of it. Normally, I would have done it without complaint, silently keeping the household afloat. But this time, I intentionally let small things slide. Laundry remained unfolded, groceries weren't put away, bills were pushed to the side. I watched the clock, making deliberate pauses before responding to service providers. By mid-afternoon, Jenna was already sending frantic texts, asking for help, trying to micromanage from a distance. It was intoxicating, not because I enjoyed watching her struggle, but because I finally had control over a situation where she had assumed power for so long. She didn't realize it yet, but she was learning the hard way. Relying on someone doesn't guarantee they will be there silently forever. When she returned late that night, exhausted and panicked, I was in the living room, calmly folding some of the laundry I had deliberately ignored earlier. She froze at the doorway, her eyes wide. "Mike, I didn't realize." I looked up, my expression neutral. "Didn't realize what?" I asked, pouring my words slowly, deliberately. "That the man you called useless can actually function without your constant oversight?" She tried to explain, her words tumbling out in a nervous rush. I I thought I thought everything would be fine. I didn't know it would get so chaotic. I didn't understand." "You didn't understand?" I echoed. "Exactly, that's the point. You never understood the weight I carried silently, the effort I put in every single day to keep our lives running. And now you're seeing a glimpse of what it's like when I stop silently saving your world." Her eyes welled up with tears, but this time there was no smirk, no arrogance, no deflection, only the raw, unguarded realization of her dependence. The next few days, I escalated things further. I began keeping meticulous records of her spending, her missed appointments, and the minor errors she made trying to manage the household without me. I didn't confront her immediately. The anticipation was part of the plan. Every time she saw me calmly handling emails from clients, paying a late utility bill, or negotiating a contract, I could see the doubt creeping back into her eyes. She hated it. She wanted to see me fail, and instead she was seeing me thrive. One evening, Jenna came home early from work, her face pale and drawn. "Mike, I need your help," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. "Oh, and why is that?" I asked, my tone calm but edged with an unspoken challenge. "Do you finally realize that calling me useless doesn't mean I actually am?" She nodded, swallowing hard. I I misjudged you. I didn't see everything you've done for us." "That's right," I said, my voice low and deliberate. "And now you're experiencing the consequences. This isn't punishment, it's reality. You can't take someone for granted and expect them to always be invisible forever. You can't mock someone's pain and expect them to remain silent forever." Her tears fell freely now, unrestrained. For the first time, she wasn't just scared of losing control. She was genuinely understanding the depth of her mistakes. The arrogance, the mocking, the careless words she had thrown at me were coming back to her in full force. I decided it was time to take the next step. I contacted some of her colleagues, carefully hinting at her recent oversights in managing a major campaign. Not slander, not lies, just facts. I wanted her to feel the consequences in her professional life as well. And when she started receiving urgent messages from her team, panicked emails from clients, and subtle reprimands from her boss, I could see her panic rising. That night, she confronted me again, trembling. "Mike, I don't know what to do. Everything is falling apart, and I relied on you so much. I let her words hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. Silence was my weapon now. Every stutter, every plea, every moment of panic she felt, it was a reflection of the disrespect she had shown me. Finally, I spoke, my voice calm but firm. "You see, Jenna, respect isn't given lightly, it's earned. And you've been given every chance to see my worth, to acknowledge my efforts, to value me. And yet, you mocked me. You laughed at my injury. You called me useless. This is your lesson." She looked at me, wide-eyed, tears streaming. I I understand now. I I am sorry. Please forgive me." I took a deep breath. Forgiveness wasn't about words, it was about change. "You see me now," I said quietly. "That's the first step. But respect, true respect, comes from understanding the weight of someone's loyalty and effort. You'll need to prove you understand that, not just say the words." Over the following weeks, Jenna began to adjust. She started asking for my advice before making decisions. She consulted me about finances, household management, and even the kids' schedules. She no longer assumed I would silently handle everything. She began to notice my contributions again, slowly, painfully. I continued to expand my freelance consulting work, building a reputation for competence and reliability, even while recovering from my injury. Every time Jenna saw me negotiating contracts, closing deals, and solving problems she couldn't even understand, I could see the jealousy simmering beneath her polite conversation. It was intoxicating in a way I hadn't expected, not because I enjoyed her discomfort, but because I finally had control over a situation where she had assumed power for so long. I was no longer invisible, no longer disposable, and no longer mocked. One night, as I returned from a business meeting in Austin, I found her sitting quietly on the couch, looking defeated. "Mike, I didn't realize. I, I, I sat down across from her, calm, unshakable. "You didn't realize what?" I asked, the question soft but cutting. "That the man you called useless is not only surviving but thriving without your interference?" She buried her face in her hands. I never appreciated. I never, I I leaned back, letting her words trail off. Silence was my weapon now. And for the first time, I truly felt it. The quiet satisfaction of knowing that my slow, calculated revenge was working. Jenna would never see me the same way again. She would never underestimate me again. I had been injured, mocked, dismissed, but I was still standing, stronger, wiser, more capable than ever, and she had no choice but to recognize it. The months following Jenna's breakdown had changed everything. The apartment in Dallas, once filled with tension and silent mockery, now carried a quieter, more cautious energy. She no longer laughed at me, no longer assumed I would silently carry the weight of our lives. But she was still learning. Respect isn't won overnight, and some lessons must be cemented with reality. I had spent the past weeks carefully consolidating my position, both in my professional life and in our household. My freelance consulting work had grown into a small but respectable business. Clients in Houston, Austin, and even San Antonio trusted me, and for the first time in years, I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. And Jenna was watching, silently, as her assumptions about me crumbled one by one. But there was one final step, one last piece of the puzzle that would make her fully understand the depth of her mistakes. It started with a phone call from one of Jenna's clients in Houston, someone who had recently faced serious delays and problems in their marketing campaigns. They were polite, professional, but firm. "We're disappointed," they said. We trusted Jenna, but deadlines were missed and your team's management seems scattered. I listened carefully, taking note. Then, calmly, I offered to help them as a consultant, not to sabotage Jenna, not to take revenge through deceit, but to prove competence. The client agreed, and over the next few days, I worked tirelessly to fix the issues, coordinate logistics, and present a plan that impressed them beyond expectation. When Jenna found out, she was livid. "Mike, what did you do?" she demanded, pacing our living room. "That's my client. You can't just—" "I fixed a problem," I said, my tone calm, even, deliberate. "A problem you couldn't handle because you thought I was useless. The client needed solutions, not excuses. I provided solutions. That's all." Her eyes widened, and for the first time, I saw real fear there. Not terror, exactly, but the kind of fear that comes from realizing someone you underestimated is more powerful than you imagined. You can't just interfere like that," she stammered. "Oh, I can," I replied evenly, "and I will, whenever I see incompetence, laziness, or disrespect. That's my new rule, Jenna. You called me useless, laughed at my pain, and assumed I would always handle everything silently. Now I act, not out of spite, but out of principle. I act to show respect must be earned, not taken for granted." The next week, I introduced a series of subtle changes in our household. I reorganized our bills, set strict payment schedules, and even created a small emergency fund she hadn't known about. Every move was deliberate, not to punish her, but to teach her that life isn't easy when you underestimate someone who has silently carried the load. Jenna noticed, of course. She tried to act indifferent, tried to argue, tried to regain control, but it was too late. I had reclaimed it. One evening, she finally broke. She came into the living room, tears in her eyes, voice shaking. "Mike, I don't know how to say this. I was wrong. I treated you terribly. I mocked you. I laughed at your injury. I held up a hand, stopping her. "Jenna, stop. You don't get to beg for forgiveness with words. You get to show me you understand through actions, through change. Respect isn't given freely, it's earned, and you've had months to earn it." She nodded, biting her lip. "I want to. I really do. I I didn't realize. I never appreciated you." The words were enough for now, enough to know that the lesson had been delivered. I had shown her, quietly, deliberately, and without violence, that mocking someone who has always been loyal comes with consequences. But the real moment of closure came a few days later. I received an invitation to speak at a business conference in Austin. The topic, resilience, overcoming setbacks, and maintaining integrity in the face of betrayal. It was an opportunity I had worked hard for, long hours, countless late nights, and a relentless focus on building myself back up. I hesitated briefly, knowing Jenna would be in the audience, possibly expecting me to falter under scrutiny, but I accepted. This was the final stage, a public demonstration, not of revenge, but of triumph. The night of the conference, the room was packed. Executives, professionals, and journalists filled the seats. Jenna sat near the front, her posture tense, eyes flicking nervously toward me as I stepped onto the stage. I began speaking, my voice strong, calm, and confident. I talked about my injury, about the accident at the construction site, about the weeks of pain and struggle. I spoke about the mockery, the dismissal, the disbelief I faced, all without naming her directly, but with enough context that anyone who knew our story could piece it together. Then I spoke about resilience, about standing up quietly when the world underestimates you, about reclaiming control without anger, without aggression, simply through competence, patience, and unwavering focus. Jenna watched, transfixed. Every word, every pause, every example was a reflection of the man she once called useless, and by the time I concluded, the room erupted in applause. Afterwards, she approached me, voice small, almost reverent. "Mike, I didn't realize you're incredible. I misjudged you. I'm sorry." I smiled faintly, my heart steady. "Thank you," I said. "That's all I needed to hear. Respect doesn't come from words alone, Jenna. It comes from understanding, from recognizing effort, from seeing someone rise despite adversity. You've had months to learn that. Now I think you do." The shift was complete. I had taken the man she dismissed and turned him into someone she could no longer underestimate. The house, our relationship, and even our professional lives had changed. I wasn't just a provider anymore. I was a man who had reclaimed dignity, respect, and control, quietly, deliberately, and with precision. In the weeks that followed, Jenna continued to adjust. She began managing her own responsibilities more thoughtfully, consulting me instead of dismissing me, and slowly earning back the trust she had taken for granted. I had changed too. My injury had left scars, yes, but it had also revealed a strength I hadn't fully acknowledged. I had discovered that revenge doesn't always mean hurting someone physically or destroying their life. Sometimes the most powerful revenge is showing someone their own flaws reflected back at them in a way that transforms both parties. One quiet evening, I sat in the living room, my arm resting on the couch, looking at the bills neatly organized, the kids' homework completed, and Jenna sitting across from me, genuinely seeking advice on a decision she was about to make. I realized then that revenge had been the vehicle, but respect had been the destination. And I had finally arrived. I reached for my cup of coffee, took a slow sip, and smiled. Jenna looked at me, and for the first time in years, I saw genuine admiration and understanding in her eyes. Not fear, not smugness, not arrogance, only respect. I had been mocked, dismissed, and called useless, but I had emerged stronger, smarter, and more in control than ever. And in that quiet, ordinary moment, I knew this was victory. Not loud, not dramatic, not destructive, but lasting, unshakable, and undeniable. The man she once thought was useless had become the man she could no longer underestimate again. And that, finally, was the perfect ending.